Catapult your business. My name is Casey Clark. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cultivate Advisors. I've got an amazing client of ours here joining me today. He brought a fantastic question, which was, what does it take to get to an 8-figure business? We all have this desire. Many of us start businesses with this growth goal of first getting to a 7-figure, then an 8-figure. Some of us even have the tenacity and ambition to go after a 9-figure business. But when we do that, it's a very different type of business. In fact, most say that the difference between running a 7-figure business and an 8-figure business is that the businesses look completely differently. I would agree with that to an extent. And we're going to talk about some of those. What are myths and what are actually realities, as I have experienced that size of business. And as you're going to learn, our guest today has absolutely got off to a roaring start in their business and is well on their way to 8 figures. And we're going to talk about that and so much more. Before we get to the question, let me introduce you to our talented client that we're so lucky to be along this entrepreneurial journey with. Chase, welcome to the call.
Hey, Casey. Thanks for inviting me on. Excited to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you as well. For anybody that hasn't met Chase before, Chase actually is the owner of Silicon Signs, doing all type of signage from, I'm not going to talk about it, Chase. I'm going to let you talk about it. What types of signs? I know you guys are really niched in on this.
Yeah, well, we're actually kind of a one-stop shop as far as the type of signs that we do, but what we focus on franchises and multi-unit companies. So we're a national sign company. We ship most of what we fabricate out of state. We've been in all 50 states and even in Puerto Rico and Canada. So a lot of restaurants and other franchises really are our niche.
I love it. Well, I saw one of your clients, which is like my all-time favorite, which is Crumble Cookies. I literally saw that. I was like, oh man, I've paid for some of that signage in my local neighborhood in terms of how often I go there. So you definitely have hold the anchor in the industry, and you're doing a great job. So you've had this business, right? For just over 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And you've been partnered with us now, and on behalf of Jay, your advisor, thank you for letting Cultivate be along this journey here for the last 18 months or so. We're excited to see where you continue to thrive. I know I speak on behalf of Jay we've just really enjoyed working with you. You're talented, and there's a lot of opportunity, and it's really cool to see you seize it.
Likewise, it's been a great learning experience, and we've come a long way since working with you guys.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'll pass that along to Jay, or maybe he'll watch it. We'll find out. But as far as your business itself, why is this 8-figure conversation interesting to you? Like, why do you want to go off and achieve 8 figures?
I think it probably goes back to my roots as an athlete. I was a track athlete in college. I was on a couple of U.S. teams. My goal was to make the Olympics. I didn't make it, but I did everything I could to try to get there. And I've just always had this drive, I guess, for more or to just maximize the potential. And so it wasn't my goal originally with the sign company to reach 8 figures. It was mostly just to make a healthy living and to start a cool company that had good profit margins. But once we funneled down more to a really specific niche of working with these franchises to where we can really define who our target market is, I realized that we have something special here, and that if we make tweaks in the right places and get the right people involved, that we could get there and be the best in the world. I think it goes back to the hedgehog concept from Jim Collins, where he says, if you can be the best in the world at it, and if you can make money at it and you enjoy doing it, then that's your hedgehog concept. And so I kind of looked at that and said, I think I could be the best in the world at this. And so this is the next step on the path.
Well, it's an absolute trifecta, right? I mean, the reality is if you love running a business, if you love, the service and product, like you said, like if those things come together while also connecting back to being able to make money and actually doing it well, right? Not just, some people make money in businesses and there's sometimes a question of like, should you be making money on what you're doing? Are you actually adding immense value? I think that some people get in trouble at it. It's interesting that your desire was more like, I want to have a healthy living. I want to have something I can own. I want to be the best at it. And then you kind of came roaring out, right? You've, in this last 5 years, you've built a multi-million-dollar business which not many businesses can say, right? You usually see anywhere from 1 in 20 to 1 in 23. Those are the stats I've always seen over the last several years of businesses that get to 7 figures. So you can imagine how small of a percentage, right? You start to get to, 1 in 130 to 1 in 160 is, again, the range I see of statistics of business owners that get at some point in their lifetime to an 8-figure business, right? And again, that's anywhere from 10 to 99 million, just depending on the outside of it. So I guess when you thought about this and when you think about 8 figures, what do you think the difference is? I'm going to dive into a bunch more. And I know a bunch of our audience and entrepreneurs that are listening in, they're going, I imagine it's like this. I imagine it's like this. But I've just, I've ran one. So I'm just curious, like, what's your perspective of what the difference is from 7 to 8 figures?
Yeah, I guess one main theme that I imagine is professionalism.
Okay.
We're in a largely blue collar industry, fabricators, installers, people
Right.
up in bucket trucks. And so, you're thinking about, fence builders or contractors, it's not very professional. And so, when I imagine it, I imagine something super dialed in and neat and yeah, very professional. Every interaction with customers is just done. Everything is done with processes. Everything is documented and replicable. And I think, most importantly, not reliant on the founders of the company to make sure it happens. That we have good executives and managers in place to make sure that those processes are run. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I imagine.
You're talking the language without a doubt. So I can tell you've already got your head wrapped around some of it. Now the devil's in the details, right? In terms of the ability to execute on that and how to do that. But I wrote down and I put in big parentheses, kind of hashes here for myself of neat. Like you've got to make it neat, right? You go on to talk about the processes, the systems. I'm going to talk about a different perspective I have of what the difference is, because argumentatively you need some of those things to get to most 7-figure businesses as well. It's how do you get to a different scalable level is what this is really talking about. So for everybody listening in, I'm going to take us on a journey today of what does it take to get to an 8-figure business. And I'm going to talk about, again, what are some of the myths that people think it takes, but I'm also going to talk about some other areas of the reality of what actually it takes. And I think the first thing I always start with is mindset. I actually find the difference of an owner that gets to 8 figures versus not, it starts with mindset. Not just the tenacity or the attainment, right? Like you talked about your track background, your desire to achieve the goal and just keep wanting more and more and more, never settling, always optimizing, starting to compete with yourself. These are all the intangibles you do need to generally have as the owner of the business to get it to that point, unless you're made of money already, and then you can write checks to put a CEO in place that has that same type of behavior. But the reality is outside of that, the additional part of mindset that most people miss is actually connecting your exit to the conversation. Why do you actually need to get to a specific number? Because if it is just a vanity, if it is just I want to say I accomplished this, I actually have seen tons of people get even up to 7, 8, 9 million and fall short. And it's not about the ability. It's actually around the decision making. The decision making and not getting too excited about the timeline. Most people I find, they try to shortchange this because they want the accomplishment. That's the drive. I continue to see those not necessarily achieve it. It's the people that actually allow the model and the scalability factor, which I'll talk about that more in just a moment. It's what allows the time to take per that scalability factor. And it might be 4 years, it might be 1.5 years. It's very different depending on the business and what foundation you've built to be able to make that happen. And obviously I know with Jay, you've probably got a bunch of spreadsheets and plans and you have clarity of where you want to take this. But the reality is never to come in with I must, and actually change the mindset to go, it's not if, it's not about if I'm going to do it. It's about when I'm going to do it. And when you can change that and get that culture throughout your organization, I find that you get the culture's mindset of the organization moving at a much faster pace because they stop thinking about deadline and they actually start thinking about we will get here. Failure of this is not an option. It's actually we're going to let time and the model tell us how to make that happen, and we're going to keep optimizing until it does happen. And then that last piece of that exit there, it's so crucial you figure out, what are you going to do when you get to 10 figures? Are you going to sell this thing? Are you going to hold on to it as a lifestyle business? Right? Are you going to go get a capital partner and take it to a 9-figure business? Like what's the strategy? Because how you build the 8-figure business will actually be different depending on what you want to do with it. If I wanted to go get a capital partner, if I wanted to go franchise a business, I would do things very differently in building the 8-figure business than I would if I just plan to sell it the moment I get there. And so it's really important to have that locked in a box as tight as you can before you then go after the journey of 8 figures. In my opinion, I think you will make better decisions in that pursuit, and you will understand what to prioritize as you get across the line.
Are you getting the advice you need for your business from this episode? Do you want to get more than just one question answered and have it customized to you and your business? Well, Cultivate Advisors works one-on-one with thousands of business owners every day. Let them help you scale your business today. Don't just listen to this episode. Take action and go to cultivateadvisors.com to see which advisor you get matched with and receive a free 2-hour business assessment on how you could scale your business to the next level. Act now at cultivateadvisors.com.
Let me circle back over. Now that we've talked about mindset, I'll assume you get that in place here. Chase, let's pull this back now. You brought up this professionalism piece. You brought up this NEAT. You brought up this systems and replicatable. And you even talked about owner reliancy, right? Getting away from that dependency that the owner has. How are you doing on that right now? If you were to die in the bus tomorrow, the classic analogy, I don't know why we chose a bus, and I don't know why we just chose death. It was very morbid of all of us. But based on that analogy, if that were to happen, would the business thrive?
Man, that is the question.
Everybody else listening is asking the same things in their head. So don't worry, you're not alone.
Yeah, I've been working with Jay for the last year and a half on removing myself from that, and I had a baby at the end of November, and that was kind of our deadline. Thank you. We said, okay, on November 30th, or I guess the baby was due December 10th. So here's our due date. In December, I'm leaving. I'm gone for a month, and sink or swim, the employees are going to run this thing and see what happens. And I left, and it was fine. I came back. It's like, oh, you guys did just fine without me. And kind of let that run for a few months. And then we started to find out that there's actually some things that we need to tweak. And so, jump back in. We're working on some things again to get back, to find out where our weaknesses are. So
yep.
I don't know where the end is. I always find myself leaving and then kind of coming back in, then leaving, then getting sucked back in. And I guess we're doing a B-.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. Well, I think what most owners don't realize is that usually what happens is as you become a scaled business, the owner or CEO, right, has to start to jump around and do these interim roles. And the key is actually that when you put the leader in place, your goal is to not have to go back to a department or section of the business that you've built out and built all the infrastructure around so that somebody else can run it besides you, right? It's really about duplicating yourself and creating multiple CEOs that oversee, usually titled vice presidents, or some type of, executive level title that's running a department or running a segment for the business. And so as you work through that, it's actually very normal, right? For the next, several years in that pursuit, that's going to be your role. I am CEO and I am interim director of marketing as well as interim sales driver, right? And then, and sometimes even it's like I am interim janitor.
Yeah.
That's my role right this minute. But what's really important about it is in that journey, you actually document and identify what role you are and share that openly with your company. It's actually okay to have an open conversation like, I'm CEO. I do that 3 days a week. The other 2 days a week, I'm running this, right? Like right now, I'm driving all of marketing for our organization, right? I'm right now the CMO and the CEO. I'm interim CMO. If you go to our org chart, you will actually see my face as the interim CMO. And everybody knows I'm working myself out of that right now because all the other departments are running for the organization. Right? So having that clarity with your team also is how your team understands where are you building right now? Where's the most change? Where's the most movement? Where's the most risk being taken? And that allows your entire team to also realize and go, I better do my role. I better do this well, right? Like I've been empowered, enabled to do this. I better follow through. And you'd be shocked how much that moves the mindset of your organization when they start to realize what roles you're sitting, and then they keep seeing roles come off, and then you announce that you're taking a new role on in the organization. So
gotcha.
Interesting way just to kind of maybe connect a little bit of the devil's in the details around the owner dependency piece. I think there's this other piece though, Chase, and you brought this up right on the intake when we were chatting. You brought up this idea of like imposter syndrome, right? It's like, why would all my staff, right? I'm going to double my staff in the next couple of years and this objective to get to 8 figures. Why would they listen to me? I've never done it. They know I haven't done it before. Right? Like at some point this all the owners listening in, right? All the entrepreneurs in the audience are like, yep, I felt this way before. And I talk about this a lot. And I talk about this with our leaders on our team, right? Is because we've scaled very, very quickly, well beyond 8 figures. And what I've really experienced when I work with people is they become answer hotlines. The bigger the business gets, for whatever reason, we move into a model of we need to have the answers. I have a different look on imposter syndrome. I actually think that people who go into imposter syndrome are not thinking about the business properly, and that actually will hold you back from 8 figures. Instead, what I would encourage you to, or just a slight paradigm shift, is I would actually come at this from a different angle. I would come at it from the angle of my job is to influence my executives. My job is to empower executives. And so it's actually an open, honest conversation with your team of do not bring me all the questions. I do not need to be a part of every decision. I'm a part of the goal. I am a part of the budget. I am a part of key decision making on those elements. You are in charge of the path. There are many paths to get to the goal. Your experience you took through college and onto the USA teams, that was probably very different than other folks that got to the same level in their career of track. My assumption. They probably took very different paths, had the same goal. The difference between 7-figure and 8-figure in my experience is as a 7-figure, I was so focused on the end customer. I was so focused on the customer experience, what that process felt like, what it looked like, how that would work through, what type of referrals was I getting, how is it working, how is the sales channels working. As an 8-figure owner, I rarely am actually looking at that. My customer is my team, not my clients. My team's customer is the clients. And so the team themselves, that's now your customer. Your job is to educate them that I'm not going to give you the answers. In fact, I expect you to go find the answers. Now, I will invest in your development. I will invest in what it takes to help you identify that. And I'm definitely somebody to spitball and brainstorm. But you are moving from a generalist to a specialist environment when you go from 7-figure to 8-figure. 7-figure, you need people to think like entrepreneurs, wear a lot of hats, jump around, a lot of different roles. 8 figures is all about a specialist mentality. You're going to lose some of your staff in this process, by the way, because they're not going to like being put into a box. But by moving to a specialist, you can have an open, honest, transparent conversation with your teams, and you can let them be aware that I will not be providing the answers. That's your job. I will always be here to help generate ideas. I will always be here to be your soundboard, but you need to be better, higher skilled, and more efficient than I ever could have been in this role. That's why you're here. That is a mindset shift that most owners never make. Have you ever golfed, Chase?
Oh yeah, really poorly, but I love it.
Okay, perfect. I also suck at golf. I'd like to think I'm amazing at it, but I know deep down I'm not. So when you go golfing, right, a lot of instructors, when you get your first lesson, they're like, why are you gripping, this club so hard? You're not going to lose it, right? Everybody over grips, right? Like hold on to it really tight. And anybody who's taken a professional lesson usually is taught very quickly, loosen that grip, hold the club properly, right? Think about that as a business. This is about loosening actually our control and our grip. And I'm sure you're talking to Jay about this on the leadership elements around giving up control. Most owners don't want to give up control. Most owners started the business because they wanted to call the shots, because they wanted to have control, which is where imposter syndrome comes in, because what happens is you have a knowledge burnout. And then you wonder why people are listening to you because deep down, you're just making it all up. The way I've overcome making it all up, I just tell my team constantly, Chase, we're all just making this up. In a meeting, right? It's like, here's an idea. I literally just made that up. This could be the worst idea ever. What are your ideas? Yeah. Let's get them all on the board. This isn't about my idea or your idea. This is about the best idea to solve this problem for this company. And the moment you shift that culture, which happens with intentionality and like open conversations about this stuff and bringing a language to it, the moment you do that, you will see imposter syndrome slip away. Not only of yourself, more importantly, an 8-figure leader, an 8-figure business owner is thinking about imposter syndrome for their team. It's no longer about you ever. 8-figure business is selfless because you're looking at your team leader and having an open conversation about their imposter syndrome. Why do they feel like they're delivering the answers? Why are they calling all the shots? If they get hit by a bus, do I have to step back in? Because I sure as heck don't want to. You better have people developed underneath you that can rise up and take that role as we keep growing and scaling to the next level.
Thanks for tuning in to Catapult Your Business, where Cultivate Advisors is helping you catapult your business one question at a time. Are you running your business, or is your business running you? At Cultivate Advisors, they'll match you with an expert advisor and do a free 2-hour deep dive for your business. This will give you the clarity you need on how to get your business to the next level. Cultivate has worked with thousands of businesses. What do you have to lose? So head over to cultivateadvisors.com and sign up for your free 2-hour session.
I got you thinking a little differently on the leadership side?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just the thought of they are my customer, the leaders, that's a very different way of thinking about it.
Well, it's scale, right? And you've already done some of these things. So like a couple other things that I would share for people listening in that I know you've done. One of them is like, you have got to over niche in on a simple service, right? In our space, I always talk about our business just because I never want to put anything on anybody else. But in our space, there's tons and tons of different business coaches that all do all kinds of things. Most have 14 different products, from a DIY download to courses you can buy to then, they just like ladder it up and it's just complicated. We scaled, and I believe we're one of the largest small business advisory firms there are in the country. Well, the way we did it was we just had one simple service. We give everybody the same service. We don't change it ever for anything, right? If it's not a good fit, we just say that's not a good fit and that's okay. I know you've done that same thing, right? You've really niched in, like, this is what we do well. We're the one-stop shop in this box, and we're not going to leave that box. The more simple you make it, the faster it scales. The more simple you make it, the higher margin you grab. The higher margin gives you more money to invest in cost per acquisition. The difference between a 7-figure business and an 8-figure business is a simple widget, and the owner can spend more on each cost per acquisition because of how simple the widget is and the amount of margin that spends off of that simple widget. It's actually just a mathematic formula. Think about it. Most businesses are like, if I want to grow, right, I need to get a consistent, sustainable marketing engine that I have predictability. If I put X amount in, I get Y back. If I give the system $10,000, do I get 3 clients back because I need to hit a $3,300 cost per acquisition or whatever the numbers might be? The most important metric for scale, sustainable, profitable scale, is cost per acquisition of a client. Number one metric. For an owner, not saying your team. Your team may not even know. But the owner, when you make decisions to build out your sales channels, when you make decisions to build out your marketing channels, if you decide to ever go franchise, the whole working model is all going to flow back to your cost per acquisition. Interesting. It either works or it doesn't. 90% of business owners undervalue how much it's going to cost to keep up with scale and achieve that many customers at that level. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the root issue that ultimately holds people back from achieving continued scale. Because rarely do I see somebody get to 8 figures and not keep growing. I think people kind of think it's like this, like, I got there. Usually you have to build it in a way that it's an engine that's just going to keep building. So again, my advice to anybody listening in today that wants to get to an 8-figure business, when they look at that marketing engine, don't get excited about passing that 10 million number. Work it backwards and figure out what's your run rate. How much do you need to grow by on a quarterly basis or on a monthly? How many new clients do you have to bring in each month to create a sustainable engine? And then let that time period tell you what will be 10 million, and then 13, then 18, then 26, then 30. Predictability, and that's what rockets your multiple as well. When you have that much clarity, when you go to your future buyer with your cost per acquisition and tied into your run rate of understanding what your predictability is, and it's a money in, money out system, I mean, world's your oyster. Then it just becomes a cash problem.
In an industry where the invoice amount is always different, everything we're doing is custom, do you just determine what that cost per acquisition is based off of history and say this is what it historically has been, so here's how we forecast?
Yeah, lifetime value is where I would go. What's the lifetime value of a client? I wouldn't do it on an order basis. I would think about what's the client earn me? With it only being 5 years, your lifetime value probably won't mature until 8 or 9 years in, where you really know. So you're going to have to make some assumptions, right? Business is going to go out of business. They stop using you because they meet somebody else. A lot of different reasons, right? Because you obviously get repeat orders, especially the niche you've gotten into. That's how you've scaled across the country, I know. So you might be spending you might realize for each franchise system, you are willing to spend $50,000, $100,000 in cost per acquisition, because you start to understand the lifetime value of that network. So you got to get some data analysis ran. This is something Jay could probably help you roll through pretty quick, actually, if you made a focus on the roadmap. But it's about slowing down and making some assumptions and then just watching it. Our lifetime value has changed for each year we change it. We measure it every year and then update our models. It goes up every year because people stick around longer and longer and longer with us, right?
And how would you average out the difference between a Crumble Cookies, who has 800 stores open, is going to open another 800 stores,
right,
versus someone who's we're going to try to scale to 10 units this year?
Yeah, I mean, this is why Salesforce is will come out and say, hey, there's small business, there's mid-market, and there's enterprise. This is exactly why people have created their tiers, right? So it's okay if you want to run this analysis and diversify it against 2 or 3 different types of client personas and say, this is my fast-growing franchise networks. This is my mom and pop businesses. You might have 2 or 3 personas and you're running it on 3 different numbers.
Gotcha.
And working that back, and I can spend cost per acquisition, and I do different marketing tactics for all 3 of these. Mm-hmm. Again, in the enterprise space, people don't realize that the people who really scale, they're throwing events for $40,000, $50,000 and inviting 40, 50 people, spending $1,000 per person and grabbing 4 or 5 new clients out of that will then bring back a lifetime value of $400,000 or $500,000. But if I told you, give me $50,000, I'll give you $500,000 over the next 3 years, would you do it?
I'll make that deal. Yeah.
Every time, right? Every time. So you have to get it down to massive tracking, massive predictability. That's more important than the processes and systems, in my opinion. They're both important. But without that, you don't even have the engine to even build the processes and systems behind it for.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we've talked right about the mindset, the exit ready piece that has to be connected if you really want to make the right decisions. We talked about the actual leadership side of owner dependency and getting into what does this look like with imposter syndrome, and that your clients are actually the employees and the teams that you lead. That's the difference of a scaled business. You've already niched in really well, but for others listening in, they needed to hear that. They need to understand that you've got to have a simple product. You can always branch out later. Number 4 now, what we've talked about is we've moved to the marketing predictability of cost per acquisition. If that's not rock solid, 8 figures is usually out of the question. And the next one that I'm going to talk about is cash, right? Most people do not have enough cash to grow because they don't understand the cost associated with growth, and it is very expensive. They get too tied to short-term profitability, and they don't run what I call adjusted P&Ls. So it is really important that whoever's running your books, you are running a P&L, and then you're also running your adjusted P&L. Meaning, if I didn't want to keep growing, what would I be profiting? What would I be cutting? What should be adjusted out of this? So that way you can always keep an eye on the health of the model, but you take bigger risks. And then you run a cash flow pro forma through that to go, how much cash do I need on stress tests to make sure I can evolve and take on the growth needs? Because the first time you go to jump client acquisition with new marketing tactics or sales tactics, you're probably going to do it at 1/3 of what you'll eventually get to in terms of efficiency and output of finance. It's very expensive. The learning curve is expensive. People spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on education and university to get a better job. It is no different. There's just no way, maybe outside of Cultivate, there's nowhere to go to get taught how to become a CEO and learn all these things of what works and what doesn't. So it's expensive. The mistakes are expensive.
Yeah.
So you need probably more cash than you may realize. And again, I don't know your exact cash position. That's for you and Jay to work through, but just make sure that's in check. And then the last one, I rarely have seen a business owner get to 8 figures when they make decisions from emotion versus data. You brought up systems and processes. I'm going to give you a different word that I think is more impactful. Guardrails. The biggest risk data-wise to your business is human capital mistakes. People mistakes is the biggest risk to your business. Not just screwing up something with a customer. This is a team member deciding they want to recreate what you've done and steal your accounts. This is a core values issue, right? Human capital errors is the biggest risk to your business. And majority of businesses, that's the biggest risk at scale. You have got to create guardrails. Processes are is ways to document, tells people what to do. Important, but only if they use it. Systems usually is referring to some type of system where things happen without humans. That's great. Guardrails, I want you to think about a highway. All the cars going down the highway. You put guardrails down the highway to keep all the cars in the highway. That way the cars can't get off the highway so you don't create chaos. That's what you have to build in the business. Don't just think about building a process. Solve a guardrail where a human cannot make a mistake. Meaning, don't let everybody have access to your CRM. Limit that down. Tighten that up. Don't expose yourself to that risk. Only people who need to have it have it. Focus on hierarchical, who has access to what. Focus in on creating automation that when somebody does a task, it triggers 2 or 3 other things to keep everybody in a guardrail and have quality checks on the business. So as you scale, it keeps everybody in the highway. That's very different than processes and systems.
Yeah.
That's the different level. That's what I would say is the professionalism that you spoke to.
Yeah.
Versus, I'm not going to use blue collar versus white collar. I think that's a misconception. I don't think there's more professionalism. I don't want my painter to show up in the nines really clean, because then I'm really nervous they've never got paint on them and they don't know what they're doing. I want them to look like an absolute mess when they show up to my house. Okay? The professionalism is the experience because of the guardrails that keeps everybody within the highway.
What are some other examples that you can think of, just so I can wrap my head around this concept?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll give just a really simple example. So let's say on the customer side, right, we're going to automate out a survey. Well, when that survey hits, if that score is too low, it should automatically trigger an additional dialing system from a third-party company that's reaching out to get a call scheduled with the supervisor to have a conversation to proactively work through. And if the conversation doesn't happen, an email automatically gets notified out to that person and their supervisor, letting them know we have not discussed the low score on what happened with that project. And you create chaos and pain when we make a mistake, so it keeps people guardrailed. So people don't want a low score on their survey. You just created a guardrail, right? Accounts receivable, right? A billing doesn't go through, come up with some type of system where it automatically is billing. There's automatic sequences, and that there's no way you could ever forget to collect payment from this customer, right? You'll have your manual reconciliation, but mistakes happen. So think of other ways to circumvent, right? On the people side, like you want everybody to make sure they're having a one-on-one. Build automation to track the calendars, make everybody have the same naming convention on the calendar, and have it roll up into a report where you can see the number of one-on-ones that were on the calendar between each person in your organization.
Yeah.
Those are guardrails.
Okay.
Now you have clarity and visualization into the data of your business, which allows you to run it and manage it and see what's actually happening in the organization.
Interesting.
A process and system is only nice because people go like, yeah, I'm following the system, I'm following the process, but you can't see it. It's not real. Seeing it means you have a guardrail.
All right.
What's sticking with you today? What's sticking with you? What are you thinking about differently? What paradigms have shifted for you today?
Honestly, I'm just like, man, am I even the right person for this job?
No. I just started to
fire
You're going
myself.
to talk like this in 5 years, bud.
No, everything's a paradigm shift. You're exactly right when you said that they look very different and they feel very different. I think I'm still in this trading time for money mindset where it's like I need to put more effort in as long as I work harder or work longer and be more, but really it's so much, it's a completely different mindset than that.
I wouldn't even put time in my top 20 of what to focus on.
Yeah. I got a lot of work to do.
Well, you and everybody else listening in, and I'm glad to hear that you're at least grabbing a couple thoughts and going, okay, I'm going to approach this a little differently, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
Chase, we've been talking a lot about how to get to 8 figures. Thanks for bringing this question to everybody. Obviously, our goal is to continue to catapult businesses one question at a time. But some people might be listening in and go like, I need signage. Like I need this for my business. Where's the best place, right? If they wanted to get something from Silicon, where's the best place to reach out to get some more information?
Yeah, you guys can check out our Instagram page at Silicon Signs. We have a lot of our work there. You can message through there. Also, we have a website, siliconsigns.com, where you can get in touch with a sales rep immediately if you send out a request there. A really, really fast response time. If it's not within an hour, then talk to me.
Find me on LinkedIn.
That's right. But my email address is chase@siliconsigns.com. So feel free to talk to me.
You just created a guardrail. You literally just created a guardrail. You said, hey, reach out to me, and I will personally see to it that you get a response within an hour. So now you have oversight. No, I'm just kidding with you. Chase, this was a pleasure. This is one of my favorite conversations to talk about. I think we don't spend enough time as owners taking a step back and work on the business and think about the business. We spend too much time trying to solve all the problems and widgets within the business. And often the mindset and the communication of transparency of what we're trying to build with our teams, the power of 14 or 18 moving at the same speed as me, as the owner, will always trump me just working more hours. So just try not to ever forget that as we go forward. And for everybody else that's listening in, keep going after your dream. Keep working towards the goals that you're working to achieve as a business owner. And congratulations again on getting through this entrepreneurial journey. We'll see you next week for Catapult Your Business, where we catapult businesses one question at a time. Chase, thanks again so much for joining. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Casey.